You're listening to part two of your GWP weekly news. It's February 23rd, 2026, and I'm your host, Jacob Fulmer, for the second portion of today's weekly news. If you missed it, part one was your weekly news with Isaac Hedges, and then now part two with me is going to be weather and sports. We had some technical difficulties, and so we made these into two separate videos. We do hope to go back to one single video next week for the weekly news. So, for today in the weather department, we're dealing with a blizzard across the Northeast. That's really our main story here. Many areas picking up anywhere from 2 to 3 feet of snow along the Interstate 95 corridor. And so, again, we do still have those blizzard warnings in effect for parts of Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine, where we've got the worst of that storm. More on that here in a moment. But we've also got winter weather alerts here across the Northern Plains, across the Great Lakes here, the Appalachian Mountains, and then also some of the mountains out west here in the Rockies as well. We've also got some wind alerts for that region, as we are going to have some strong winds here across the Rockies over the next couple of days. Same thing here across the Central Plains. We even have a fire weather watch that has been issued from northern Texas into Oklahoma. Red flag warnings in effect across the deep south and Gulf Coast as well. And then we've even got some flood watches on the other side of that across California and Oregon as well, where we're going to have heavy amounts of rain over the next couple of days. First, we're going to look at some of those power outages, particularly from that blizzard that we have been experiencing across the Northeast here. The state of Massachusetts has the most power outages at nearly 300,000 customers. New Jersey is just under 100,000. Delaware is over 50,000. Rhode Island also at 43,000. California also has a decent amount of outages there at 19,000 customers. So total, you'll see that we have 546,000 customers without power, around three people on average per household or per customer. And that means that we're at about 1.6 million people that are currently without power. If we look at some of those snowfall totals that we have seen, we've had anywhere from about 12 to 17 inches across western New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania. And then you go up into northeastern New Jersey, we've had some areas that have picked up anywhere from about 20 to 25 or 26 inches of accumulation here. We've got one report in Freehold, New Jersey that was at 26 inches. We have a couple of other locations, including Middletown, New Jersey, picking up about 25 inches. And this is not total, so there's still additional snowfall that could fall across some of these areas. What about in New York? Central Park has picked up 19.7 inches, so nearly 20 inches of snow across New York City itself. Long Island, we've had heavier totals. We had around the East Islip, New York area, around 30 inches of snow. So we've had accumulations of around 28 inches from the Medford, New York area. And then as you go into Southampton, about 26 inches. Montauk, New York, about 28 inches of accumulation. So really roughly anywhere from 20 to 30 inches of snow across Long Island and coastal Jersey. We've also had anywhere from about 15 to 20 inches across southern Connecticut. So far, the top snowfall report that we've had so far today, at least across the Northeast, was Warwick, Rhode Island, 36.2 inches, 3 feet of snow. So some areas have picked up upwards of 3 feet of snow. Providence, Rhode Island, the capital there, picking up around 36 inches of snow. Kingston, around 35 inches. Dartmouth, Massachusetts, around 33 inches of snow. We could go up to the Cape Cod, where we've had anywhere from about 15 to 20 inches. Plymouth, Massachusetts, about 28 inches of accumulation. Hanson, Massachusetts, about 30 inches. Boston, so far, picking up around 14 inches of accumulation around Logan International Airport, and then Beacon Hill at about 14 inches as well. There was a couple of reports of around 20 inches of snow as well around, or let's see, it was 26.3 inches was recorded from the National Weather Service in Boston. So again, just really heavy snowfall totals that we saw across these areas, and it's still snowing across some of those areas. So 20, 30, even up upwards of 36 inches of snow have fallen across this region. It's also the first time that New York City has been under a blizzard warning since 2017, and it's the first time that New York City public schools have had a traditional snow day, meaning no virtual day, since 2019, the first blizzard warning issued in Philadelphia since 2016, and the first blizzard warning in Boston since 2022. So, again, just incredible snowfall totals that we have seen, bringing travel to a standstill across the Northeast. So, now let's go ahead and show you the future track here. This from Tropical Tidbits, showing us the afternoon run of the GFS model here. And so you'll notice that again, snow is going to continue through tonight across Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine, maybe even blizzard conditions at times. Slowly, those winds will start to calm down. We've had winds gusting anywhere from 50 to 60 miles per hour, and Nantucket did record a wind gust of over 80 miles per hour. So hurricane force gusts have been experienced this weekend and into today across New England. So again, as we mentioned, by tomorrow morning, all of this will clear out of here. We could still have some lingering lake effect snow, but that is unrelated to this nor'eastern here. Then Tuesday night into Wednesday, another round of snowfall is expected across Pennsylvania, New York. So the travel impacts that we've experienced today will continue into Wednesday, except they will not nearly be as much as what we have seen today. So this snow event is going to be much less than what we've experienced today. And so that is certainly some good news here. Another storm system as we go Thursday night into Friday could bring a light dusting of snow here across Interstate 95. Some areas could pick up maybe 2 or 3 inches on the higher side. And then as we go into the weekend, things will clear out until on Sunday. We could get a weak wave as well. So things overall drying out for the most part across the Northeast, but still little bit more precipitation yet to go through tonight. So this is our snowfall, about 1 to 3 inches of snowfall still forecasted through tonight across Maine and across New England here. And then as we go through the rest of this week here, this will affect upstate New York and Pennsylvania. That's where we could have some of that lake enhanced snow. And so around 3 to 6 inches of snow is expected there. Additional snowfall across I-95 is going to be pretty light in that 1 to 3 inch range, not including the snow that we have seen for today. So, of course, we've seen quite a bit of snowfall today across the Northeast from that nor'eastern blizzard. But what about snowfall here across Missouri? Again, we're still sitting at about 7 inches for the season in Nevada, about 8.5 inches here in Columbia, which is still quite a bit below what our seasonal average and the forecast that was made by me earlier in the winter here. And so, but there is the possibility that we could be looking at a glaze of ice or maybe a dusting of snow across the Columbia area, but it's very unlikely that we would get to the seasonal average, but still something to keep in mind. Even though we are moving into the month of March next week, we can still get wintry weather across the state of Missouri in the month of March and even occasionally in the month of April. So just kind of keep that in mind. So now let's look at a couple of different regions across. We'll start out west, where we've got some rain and snow that's going to be moving in tonight across Northern California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Montana as well as you go up into the higher elevations. So that's something that we're going to experience. Then we're going to clear out the mid to late part of the week, and then into the weekend, a little bit of rain and snow will return across this region. Now, something that I do want you to notice here, not a whole lot of rain and snow across the Sierras and across southern and central California, which that's the area that we really do need the rainfall. And so that's something that we'll be watching. How much snowfall can we expect? So this is going through Sunday morning. We're looking at a couple of feet across Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, across the higher elevations in the ski resorts. These areas particularly need the snow as we're in a bit of a drought across some of these areas. Not a whole lot across the Sierras. So we are going to miss out on that potential across those areas. How much rainfall? Quite a bit, all things considering, through this weekend here, or through the rest of this week rather. Northern California and Oregon picking up anywhere from about 2 to 6 inches of rainfall. Isolated higher amounts are going to be possible. But again, Southern and Central California not going to be experiencing really any precipitation this week here. So what about here for the central US? So we looked out west. Now we're going to look at the central portion of the US here. We do have a clipper system that is going to bring some light snow across northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and into Michigan. This is as we go into your Tuesday. So this is Tuesday, really. So tomorrow, really, tomorrow afternoon, evening, and Wednesday morning, we're going to be experiencing some light snowfall across that region. That will move out by the time we get into Wednesday morning. Wednesday night into Thursday, a very weak disturbance will move through here, bringing light snow across Iowa, Illinois. Some of this could make it into northern Missouri, including here in Columbia. So that's something that we'll watch for. If we were to see any precipitation, it would likely not amount to much. It would likely not cause any travel difficulties. There would likely not be any ice, and it's most likely going to be rain. So those are some of the things that are pretty important to note about this particular wave that'll be moving through. And then we need to watch this as we go into next Sunday and Monday. It's too early to know if this will be rain, ice, snow, a mixture of all three. All of that is possible at this point in time, but again, a little bit too early as we are still about 6 to 7 or 8 days out from that storm system. But if you are planning on traveling this Sunday or Monday, just keep in mind that you could have a few disruptions, but it's too early to know exactly how much of travel disruptions we will experience. All right, and then now we're going to look at, so we are going to have some strong winds tomorrow. That's another big story is temperatures are going to warm up here across the state of Missouri. Big warm front is going to be coming through the area. And so we will see temperatures return into the 60s and 70s across the state of Missouri throughout this week. And that's going to start tomorrow with a big warm up, as we mentioned, but that is going to bring with it some strong winds. And so that's going to bring with us the risk for fires. Today, we did have a critical risk for fires across southern Florida, even across Texas and Oklahoma, we did have that elevated fire risk. But as we go into tomorrow, that risk is going to build across the state of Missouri. So we do have an elevated fire risk across southern Missouri, including Joplin up to Nevada under that elevated fire risk for tomorrow. So this is for Tuesday. Strong winds, low humidity. There is going to be a slight fire risk, not as extreme as what we had last Thursday, but definitely still a fire risk. So no outdoor burning across any of these areas as we go into the daytime hours on Tuesday. So that is something to keep in mind. How much in the way of snowfall are we expecting this week through Sunday morning here? Not a whole lot again. A few inches are possible from that clipper system from Minnesota to Michigan, and maybe some light snow here across South Dakota, Iowa, and Illinois. So that is something else that we need to mention here. All right, let's look at the temperature outlook. So now we're going a little bit more into the long range. So again, warming up the next couple of days, brief cool down, particularly in the Great Lakes as we go into Thursday, Friday, warms up quite a bit. Friday and Saturday will be the warmest days of the week. And then we are going to see a bit of a cooler air mass that's going to move in on Sunday, which could bring us some rain or snow or ice chances across Missouri on Sunday. We warm back up on Monday and Tuesday, and then likely staying warm into the first few days of March. And you'll notice the same thing is shown here by NOAA's 6 to 10 day temperature outlook here, looking at the Climate Prediction Center showing the temperatures likely staying above average across here in the state of Missouri, and precipitation will also be on the above average side as we go into the month of March. So that is something to notice, particularly in that first week. What about a little bit further into the long range? The week 3 to 4 day outlook shows temperatures will likely be above average March 7th through the 20th. Precipitation also staying on the above average side. Still going to be below average on precipitation in the desert Southwest. So this is very concerning as we get closer to fire season. And then finally, we're going to show you those hazards, those hazards outlook, excuse me. We've got slight risk for heavy precipitation here across southern Missouri. So we could be looking at some flooding as we go into next week. That's something to watch out for. And then, sorry to say this, for you in New England, more heavy snowfall is expected March 3rd through the 4th. So a slight risk for that. And then also strong gusty winds across the northern plains and Great Lakes as we go from March 3rd through the 5th. That's it for weather. Now we'll move into sports. All right, sports, we'll go ahead and we'll start by looking at the men's college basketball rankings as well as some of those different scores that we had over the weekend and some of the upcoming games as well. Then we'll do the same thing for women's basketball, and then we'll also give you an update on the Winter Olympics. So starting off with the Associated Press's updated top 25 rankings, Duke is now in the number one spot after they continue to be on quite a win streak there. They're 25-2. Arizona and Michigan both lost over the weekend, so they're now at 2-3 respectively. Both of them have a 25-2 record as well. Michigan, of course, was the number one team. Now they're at number 3. Iowa State, coming off of their big win, is now ranked number 4, so they've moved up. Houston has dropped quite a bit, 23-4. UConn is 25-3. They're ranked number 6. Florida is ranked 7, so they've jumped quite a bit. They're 21-6. Purdue is 22-5 for ranked number 8. Gonzaga is number 9. They're 27-2 for the season. Illinois still in the number 10 spot as they're 22-6. Virginia moved up a little bit. They're number 11, 24-3. Nebraska sitting pretty at 12, 23-4. Michigan State 13, 22-5 is their record. Kansas has had a couple of losses that they've come off of. They're now number 14. St. John's is now 15. And then we'll go ahead and we'll go down the rest of the list here. Texas Tech is 16, followed by Alabama, North Carolina, BYU, Arkansas, Miami, Ohio, still undefeated 27-0 at rank number 21. And then following them, we've got Tennessee, St. Louis, Louisville, and then Vanderbilt, after a couple of losses, has now dropped to number 25, but they're still rounding out the top 25. And then if we compare that to the coaches poll, there's a lot of similarities. In the coaches poll, Duke, Arizona, and Michigan are also 1, 2, and 3. Houston and Iowa State are flipped, so Houston is number 4 and Iowa State is 5. UConn and Florida and Purdue and Gonzaga are all 6, 7, 8, and 9. Nebraska is number 10 instead of number 12 in the coaches poll. Illinois, they're number 11. Virginia is 12. Michigan State and Kansas and St. John's, Texas Tech are all 13 through 15, just like they are in the Associated Press's rankings. And then Texas Tech is 16, as we mentioned. Arkansas is number 17 in the rankings for the coaches poll versus number 20 in the Associated Press's ranking. Alabama was 17 with the Associated Press, but they're 18 in the coaches poll. So again, there's a few minor differences, especially when you get a little bit further down, but overall there's a lot of agreement on the different polls here. So now let's go ahead and let's look at some of the scores that we had over the weekend. Number 23, St. Louis beat VCU 88-75 on Friday. Miami, Ohio, as we mentioned, is still undefeated. They won 91-77 against Bowling Green Friday night. Then on Saturday, we had a couple of other really big games. Of course, as we mentioned, Cincinnati winning 84-68 against Kansas. North Carolina beat Syracuse 77-64. And then we've also got, of course, Houston, as we mentioned. They had a tough loss to Arizona, who won 73-66. Texas Tech, ranked 13, beat Kansas State 100-72. Impressive that they were able to get to 100 points there. And then we had 20-ranked Arkansas beat Missouri 94-86. UConn beat Villanova 73-63. Another really big matchup was Duke, now the number one team, taking down the old number one team, Michigan, 68-63 was the final in that game. And then UCLA defeating number 10 Illinois. UCLA is unranked. That game went into overtime. 95-94 was the final score in that game. BYU taking down ranked 4 Iowa State 79-69. So that was Saturday night. Yesterday we had a very close matchup between Michigan State, ranked 15, and Ohio State, unranked, 66-60. Tonight we got a couple of big games in store. Currently, right now, we have number 24 Louisville facing off against 18 North Carolina. Later tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern, we have number 5 Houston taking on Kansas. That game is going to be in Lawrence. For your Tuesday, we have a couple of big matchups coming your way as well, as we've got Miami, Ohio facing off against Eastern Michigan, hoping to keep their undefeated season alive. And then we've got Duke and Notre Dame, Minnesota and Michigan, Arizona and Baylor, Iowa State and Utah are also going to be playing tomorrow. On Wednesday, you can expect to see St. John's and UConn facing off, Georgia and Vanderbilt, and then we've also got Wisconsin and Oregon as well. And then Thursday night will feature the matchup between Michigan State and Purdue. That game is going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday. And then we got Michigan and Illinois both ranked in the top 10, who will be facing off Friday night. So some pretty big games are in store for us. All right, so now we'll go ahead and we'll switch over to women's college basketball. And then again, as we mentioned, we'll finish things off with an update on the Winter Olympics. So looking at the Associated Press's top 25 women's college basketball rankings, UConn is still undefeated, so they're in the number one spot. 29-0 is their record. UCLA still number two, 21 or 27-1 is their record. South Carolina 27-2, they're ranked number three. Texas is ranked 4, 26-3. Vanderbilt is 25-3, they're ranked number five. So no movement in the top five of the Associated Press's top 25 rankings. There has been some movement below the top five. LSU has moved up to number six. They're 24-4. Oklahoma is 21-6. They've moved up quite a bit as they're now number seven. Michigan has dropped to number eight. 22-5 is their record. The same thing for Iowa, except they have been on the increase. They're at number nine. Louisville is number 10 at 24-5 is their record. We've also got the rest of the top 25 rankings go as followed. We had TCU at number 11. Then it goes Duke, Ohio State, Maryland, Michigan State, Kentucky, West Virginia, Baylor, Ole Miss, Texas Tech, North Carolina, Minnesota, Georgia, Alabama. Princeton at number 25 rounds out the rankings. They've only lost 3 games so far this season as well. So they've moved up quite a bit into the rankings as well. So now we'll go ahead and we'll look at some of the games that we had from over the weekend. We had Princeton beating Brown 69-37 was the final score in that game. Colorado took down Texas Tech ranked 75-68. Baylor also had a win against Arizona 74-60 on Saturday as well. Looking at some of those scores from yesterday, Alabama and Florida had a close one. Alabama coming up with the victory 76-71 in that game. South Carolina beating Ole Miss 85-48. Iowa winning against Michigan 62-44. That's part of the reason they moved up here. And then we also had a very close game between Virginia and Louisville. Louisville's ranked number 10, but Virginia did end up with the win 74-72. As we mentioned, UConn is still undefeated. They had an impressive victory, 81-38, winning yesterday against Providence. Ohio State had a close game against USC, 88-83 was the final in that game. Maryland took down Purdue 99-66. Oklahoma scoring 100 points in a shootout against Tennessee. Final score in that game was 100-93. And then another close game between Duke and Clemson. Clemson getting the victory 53-51. LSU with a huge victory against Missouri 108-55 was the final score in that game. We had a very close matchup between Kentucky and Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt winning 81-79. Of course, Vanderbilt has had quite success in both men's and women's basketball. TCU had a close game with Iowa State 80-73 as well. Tonight we've got a couple of big matchups that are actually ongoing right now at this point in time. Baylor and Kansas State, and then we've got Georgia and Auburn also facing off tonight as well. We've got some more big games as we go into Wednesday. We've got a big matchup between Michigan and Ohio State. That's going to be at 7 p.m. Central, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Of course, that's a really big rivalry in football, but it's also a big rivalry here in basketball as well. So we'll have to see what happens with that. Then as we go into Thursday, we've got a couple of other big matchups as well. UConn taking on Georgetown. We've got Duke and Florida State, Georgia and Texas, Vanderbilt and Alabama as well. And then on Friday, or excuse me, on Saturday, we have Maryland and Michigan. So that will be another really big matchup for Michigan as well going into the weekend. All right, well, that's where we're at as far as women's basketball goes. Now we're going to finish things out with an update here, or really a final report on the Winter Olympics here. Yesterday was the closing ceremony of the Winter Olympics. Norway coming up with the majority of, or at least the most, not necessarily the majority, but the most medals. Norway had 41 total medals, 18 golds, 12 silvers, and 11 bronze. The United States did come up with the second most gold medals and the second most total medals at 12 golds, 12 silvers, 9 bronze, and 33 total medals. Also in the top five with the most medals, or at least with the most golds rather, we had the Netherlands, Italy, and Germany were also in the top five. So this was also a historic Winter Olympics for the United States. In fact, that is going to be our weekly surprise for this week here on GWP Weekly News. The weekly surprise is that the U.S. had a record-setting 12 gold medals. The previous high was set back in 2002 in Salt Lake City, where they had a record high of 10 gold medals. So that's the other interesting thing about this. The U.S. has never had double-digit gold medals aside from the games that were in the United States. So this is the first time that the United States has had double-digit gold medals when they have not hosted the Winter Olympics. So that is something interesting as well. Another really important, or kind of something interesting, this is the first time that we have seen the U.S. win both men's and women's hockey games. So get gold in men's and hockey games. So that's the first time that that's happened. The last time that it happened in men's hockey was in 1980 during the Winter Olympics. So certainly quite a Winter Olympics, quite a way to finish that off here. Of course, that game was a game that went into overtime. The U.S. taking again the win in that game, 2-1 was the final in overtime. And so that, of course, is the GWP Weekly Surprise. And so that wraps things up here tonight on our weekly news. We'll see you here next week.